Hello, welcome back to The Collision. Daniel here again. Here with Donte, film buff, talented scriptwriter, this all-around good guy. If you've been following the website, thecollision.org, you've seen Dante's name. He's been doing some articles. So I've been wanting to drag him on video, let you kind of hear from him a bit. And we both saw the recent movie Ford vs. Ferrari, so let's talk about it. So Ford versus Ferrari. This is, I'll be honest, I don't know where you fall on this. I could not care less about cars. I could probably not care less, even more, about racing cars. I think my 4-year-old boys probably know more about like a car engine and stuff than I do. It's not my thing. So this movie, despite being a movie that's at least on the surface about cars, just the trailers and stuff kind of intrigued me. The dynamics of it, and in the end, I think we both will share in a second, turned out this is a really good film. What was your maybe just general? Did you enjoy this movie as much as I did?
Yes, I enjoyed it very much, and it shows the power of a great movie, the ability to create an emotional connection between the audience as well as the filmmakers and actors. And even though racing isn't my cup of tea either, I could change a tire. Don't really.
Probably
I'm
more
not.
than I can do.
Yeah, not really expert in anything else, but yes, it is. It was a good movie. I definitely enjoyed it.
Yeah, and Dante's probably more of a film buff, kind of classic film buff than I am. But to me, this felt almost like old school Hollywood, where it wasn't just spectacle. It wasn't this sort of popcorn. It's sort of that old school, which you just don't get. You don't really get enough, or at least recently, of it. Kind of these dramas that are just sort of engaging, these human stories that just the whole movie to me just felt kind of like a throwback almost to kind of movies maybe we would have seen, a decade or a couple decades ago. But why don't you give? So what's this movie? What's this movie about? What's kind of the general premise of this film?
All right. The general premise is that Carroll Shelby, played by Matt Damon, is a car designer. He actually is a retired racer, and he's called by Henry Ford II to help develop a car that's able to compete with Ferrari in the Le Mans 24 tournament or racing tournament that they do.
Which is like a 24-hour.
Yeah, it's 24-hour racing event, and he pulls in his driver Ken Miles, played by Christian Bale, in order to compete against them.
Yeah, it's kind of like and it's probably a good thing to start with those two actors, because again, this racing bores me. The idea of racing bores me. So I was like, am I really going to be into a racing movie? And I think when I came out of it, this really isn't a movie about racing. This is a human drama that happens to also have racing in it. But there's actually not a whole lot of, the end race. There's a significant, maybe the last half hour of the movie. But for the most part, it's not like this whole movie is just racing, watching cars go around.
Yeah.
So those actors, how do they, Matt Damon, Christian Bale, some of the few remaining like legitimate Hollywood leading men, they're both in the film. What would you say for them? How did they do in this movie?
They did excellent. It was nice to actually hear Christian Bale in his native accent. It's hard. We forget he's so good in what he does, and he changes his accent a little bit with every role. You forget that he's actually British. So it was nice seeing him act in his own accent, but he did very well, and it seemed Matt Damon was also able to pick up a Texas accent pretty well in it. And in sports movies, it's important because there's certain beats with the plot. You do this, you get the car ready, you do the training montage, for lack of a better term. So you have to have the personalities to be able to push it off. And you mentioned how it felt like an old school Hollywood movie, and that credit also goes to James Mangold, the director. He did Logan, and a couple of other movies. So he's really well versed in finding the drama and finding characters. So
yeah, because this movie is like 2.5 hours long, which kind of scared me going into it. Is there's very few movies that I usually feel justify a 2.5 hour long commitment. So yeah, it's a movie about racing. It's also 2.5 hours long. It's not gonna be too long. But I think just because those characters are so compelling that it doesn't feel like 2.5 hours. Like you're compelled by them. The dynamic, the chemistry from them. I don't know if they've ever been in a film. Do you know if they've been in a film together before, the two of them? I can't think of one. Um, but the dynamic between the two of them, it just feels authentic. Like it doesn't feel like they're acting necessarily. What else? Maybe it's about then we can get into some of kind of the themes and some of the storyline. But just sort of as a movie, again, you mentioned Mangold directed it. Any other positive or negative about just this as a film, kind of as the way it was constructed?
Well, it has probably the best fight involving Wonder Bread that you will ever see. I guarantee that you will not see any movie that involves a fight with Wonder Bread. So that by itself gives it major points. But on the positive side, it's immaculate in the way that it's structured, the way that it's shot. It feels like you don't see the same angles twice when they're racing cars, and it also feels like the race scenes in the film are is not there because it has to be there. It's motivated by something. It's going somewhere. It's constructed in order to get to an end point, which is really good.
Yeah, one of the things too, at least for me, I noticed was like in the racing scenes themselves, it's not you never lose the human connection in the race. Like you don't have these sort of long throwaway scenes of this car's going around and he's moving up. He's 4 more people to go. He's almost catching the leader. It's not just sort of like stock footage of racing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's almost always you barely get any of just sort of larger race scenes. It's almost always centered right into him driving or else the sidelines and what the drama that's going on. And I think that's sort of what, which for me got me so engaged to a storyline that I would not expect to, is that this is such a human story and even authentic. One of my favorite, the Christian Bale's character and his wife, their dynamic. They kind of bicker, but they also support each other, and just the way that they kind of constructed that relationship just felt really authentic and organic and just natural, and not as much of like this is a Hollywood film. This is the way characters do. They got to act this way. So this, I think the characters really drive this story forward. As far as maybe like some of the kind of the themes in this story, it's interesting because in some sense this is like an underdog story. You got to take on Ferrari, but it's different because the underdog is also Ford, which is like the man. Blank check. So what do you think? What are some of the kind of the themes that came out in this story?
The thing that really connected with me was the idea of conformity versus corporate. There are a lot of scenes where, and Matt Damon pointed out in one scene where he saw an envelope pass from 5 different people before it got to Henry Ford II and he read it. And it's just this idea of it's assembly line. There's a committee to it rather than an artistic quality. And at the beginning of the film, you actually see how Ferrari goes about making their cars. You have one person doing the transmission, one person doing the engine, and then Ferrari somewhere sipping coffee. So it's just this idea that there's some kind of artist. There's an artistic merit to it. There's a purity to it. Like Kim Miles' character is someone who wants to be great. He's dialed in and he's motivated to make this car the best car that it can be. And during the film, him and Carol are both going against the corporate suits of Ford in order to get the control that they need in order to make the best
and even
car.
the way they kind of do that, it's sort of how they get around the fact that the heroes, the kind of the side you're cheering for Ford to win this race, and they're sort of the man. They're the big corporation. They're in a lot of Hollywood movies they would be like the villains. You know, you're going against the man, but sort of by limiting it to the two main characters and sort of their struggle within the corporation, they're able to still kind of get you cheering for the underdogs, even though even though they're writing blank checks and sort of this big business. So that was fascinating. What do you think of this movie? Kind of on a thematic level is interesting because it bookends the film with sort of a similar monologue, and I forget the exact wording of the question. But it says, the only question that matters is who are you. That's sort of how the film starts, and then the film ends with a very similar repeating. The only question that matters is who are you. So kind of as a viewer, thinking, what happened in the middle to, you start with this question. How far along the track do you get? No pun intended. How long towards this question? What does this really mean? What do you just think of that question as far as sort of framing the movie?
Again, I think it goes back to the idea of purity, the idea of getting to the essence of. It's not just racing. It's like, what is it going to represent? Is it going to represent the ability to pursue excellence? And I feel like that's the biggest thing that drives both Carol and Ken during the film. Just the idea of perfection. Like, Ken sits his son down and talks about the idea of the perfect mile of being able
kind of
to
perfect lap.
The perfect lap. And I said mile, I meant lap. But the idea of just being able to do that perfectly.
Because how does that come? Because his son's sort of like, you'll never do it. You can never do the perfect lap. Mm-hmm. And I forget he says, but that doesn't mean we can't try.
Yeah, he's saying
kind of that pursuit of excellence. And it's interesting because sometimes, especially sports movies, scenes in general tend to be kind of sort of a very simple moral as far as, you got to learn to work together for the greater good. You got to sacrifice for your team. This movie doesn't really do that. This movie is more of it doesn't really have like a clear teaching kind of sermon it's trying to impart on you. It's more just like a snapshot of these individuals and just sort of the lengths they go, this sort of obsession for greatness and to win. Because the characters themselves throughout the whole movie, they're still they're doing whatever it takes. They're cheating in some ways. They're kind of pushing finding where's as far we can go to the rule book, without breaking the rule, but to give us the advantage and this sort of this drive forward of this. What will we do to kind of find this significance to win this race? All the pressures kind of put on this race. Again, we're not going to spoil how the movie ends because I think this is a movie that's worth seeing, especially worth seeing in theaters. But it's interesting. The end of the movie, in some ways, leaves you a little empty, not in like an unsatisfied with the film, but as far as sort of the message of everything was put into this race, but what does that mean with who you are? Is that really complete you? And the movie ends pretty open ended with that, kind of saying no, like kind of life goes on, and these characters are going to continue kind of pursuing greatness, finding significance. The things that they thought were all that mattered really. At the end of the day, it's just a race. It's just racing. There's got to be something more. So the movie doesn't really take you, in a biblical or Christian sense, but it definitely points you down that direction. Kind of gets you asking questions. So I found it's unique for a sports movie and a little more nuanced than we're used to. So maybe final thoughts on this film. This is what's kind of your main takeaway from Ford Ferrari? Is this a film that people should see? Is this where does this maybe rank even with films you've seen this year?
It's definitely in the top 10. I haven't worked out all the rankings of it yet, but it's definitely in the top 10 just from the way that it's crafted, and it's definitely a movie that you would want to see in theaters. I would recommend seeing it in IMAX. I would recommend seeing it as in the format that it's intended to be seen in. The acting, the cinematography, direction. It doesn't have the emotional kind of payoff that you would want in of a film to really elevate it, but it's something that I would believe that most of the people involved in it would be proud of making. So
you have Angry Birds 2, and then a little below that is I think for me, this is one of my almost surprisingly one of my favorite films I've seen this year. Again, I've been reviewing films for most of the year, and I think it's kind of a reminder of what Hollywood can do. Like what it's not. This movie isn't tied to some big franchise. It's not really trying to do anything other than just tell this somewhat contained
Yep.
human story and just sort of give a glimpse into the human character, the human spirit, for better or for worse. And again, too, there's not like quote unquote bad stuff in this film. Like
Yeah.
there's no sexual stuff. There's
No.
there's minor profanity, but no they're not dropping f bombs. The tone, even though it deals with sometimes some serious stuff, and there's the spouses can fight, or there's the Christian Bale's character has some struggles, but the overall tone is it's just sort of fun. Like I don't know, it's almost like a adventure. These two kind of buddies doing this big, we're gonna win the race. So it's not like a serious plotting, introspective film, even though it touches on some of that. So I think for both of us, recommend this is a film worth seeing. If obviously in the theater and you get the surround sound of the cars whizzing by, I think it's worth the experience. But even if you wait and see it at home, I think it's definitely don't be scared off by the 2.5 hour runtime, because it's definitely worth seeing a film that this sort of gets into the human spirit and kind of the human connection. Babe, if you saw this film, let us know your thoughts. I'm curious to kind of hear how this film landed with other people. If it seemed like critically this film was getting pretty rave reviews, but I'm curious, this, as an audience member, did you enjoy this film? Did you not enjoy it? Was it too long, or was the 2.5 hours like for me it seemed to go by pretty quick? Let us know your thoughts. And again, if you haven't done so already, we'd love for you to subscribe to our channel. Keep up with all of our video content. Make sure you hit that like button on this video. Let your friends know about it. But again, we want to thank you for watching and hope you'll continue to collide with your world for Christ.